wife, and then the wives would run down to the stores and buy anything they could get their hands on, because they didn't want to hang on to their money for even 1 hour. People would go to the pub and they'd buy a pint of beer, but they'd buy 2 at a time, because by the time they finished the first one, the second one would cost twice as much. And I think one of the most amusing stories is a fellow was wheelbarrowing his money down the sidewalk, and he stopped for a moment to look in a window, a store window. And while he was doing it, someone came along and stole his wheelbarrow and left the money. Hyperinflation is something we want to avoid. And here's where it hurts the most. Those who are thrifty, those who are savers, those who are wise money managers, if you put your money into savings, into a money market account, into a bank CD, or you just stuff it under your mattress, when hyperinflation kicks in, it's as if you didn't have any money, even if you were a millionaire. Here's the lesson in all of this. People generally want more money. But what they're really saying is they wish their money went further. They want to be able to get more stuff with each dollar. Creating money out of thin air does not make a nation wealthier. It just devalues the money that you and I currently hold. Let's take a look at how the Federal Reserve causes recessions. In his 1934 book called The Great Depression, economist Lionel Robbins asked, why should there be sudden clusters of errors among entrepreneurs? Given that the market, via the profit and loss system, naturally weeds out the least competent entrepreneurs, why should the relatively more skilled ones that the market has already rewarded suddenly commit grave errors? Could something outside of the market economy account for this phenomenon? Well, economist Ludwig von Mises and his student F.A. Hayek said this phenomenon was caused by artificial money creation at the hands of a government-established central bank, the Federal Reserve. Before I show you what the Fed does to mess things up, let's follow Hayek's advice. He said, before we can even ask how things might go wrong, we must first explain how they could ever go right. Money is a good. And just like any other good, it has a price. We express the price of money in terms of an interest rate. For example, when you deposit money into a savings account, your money earns interest. Or used to earn interest. Doesn't really earn too much interest today. But the interest earned is the money that the bank is willing to pay you for use of your money. In a free market, the price of any good is determined by supply and demand. And money is no different. As supplies increase, prices fall. And as supplies shrink, prices tend to rise. So money is a good. Money has a price that gets expressed as an interest rate. And supply and demand determine the price of money. The following is an example of how money is put to use to create an economic boom that is not only genuine, sustainable, but won't end in a recession. And the driving force behind this is savings and production. So we'll call this example a savings-induced boom. As people save money, banks obtain an increased supply of loanable funds, causing the price of money to fall. This sends out a signal to the business community saying, now might be a good time to invest in those long-term projects that before seemed unprofitable because the price of money was too high. So lots of new investment activity takes place. Entrepreneurs borrow, they invest to build additional manufacturing plants, new manufacturing equipment, new construction projects begin. Maybe they expand their facilities around the country or engage in some new long-term research and development. Anything that's a capital-intensive project requiring large sums of money that before just seemed too costly because the price of money was too high. Not every project's going to succeed. Obviously, not all entrepreneurs are going to be efficient with their use of money, and not all of them are going to accurately forecast the needs, wants, and desires of consumers. But in general, there is a reasonable expectation that these projects will make it through to completion, and just as important, consumers they're going to be able to buy the new productions because they'll have money available through their savings. New investments, new productions, new jobs are created. This type of economic activity leads to lower prices on consumer goods and standards of living rise. And that's something we haven't seen in this country for decades. Sustainable prosperity of this kind can only come about from a savings-induced boom. Now, let's do that again, but I want to change it up a little bit. What happens if people aren't saving any of their money? Well, it means that consumers have a high demand for the use of their funds. They're spending it all. And they don't want to put it in a bank. Therefore, the bank's supply of money drops and the interest rate goes up. This also sends out a signal to the business community that says, borrowing right now for long-term productions might not be a good idea. Because not only might it be unprofitable, but consumer spending habits say they want their stuff right now, not in the future. So they're not going to have adequate resources to purchase the expanded future productions. The wise entrepreneur forecasts this and avoids expanding. Now here's where we bring in the Federal Reserve, that outside market force. Same scenario, the consumers are spending all of their money, banks have a very small supply of loanable funds, hence the interest rates are high. In all their wisdom, they look at these high interest rates and decide that the economy needs a boost. They're kind of like Dennis the Menace. You remember Dennis? That kid, he couldn't keep his fingers off of anything. It didn't even matter if he thought he was being helpful. It seemed like whatever he touched ended in disaster. That's the Federal Reserve. They can't stand the idea of just leaving it alone. They're constantly tinkering. And so, they give the economy a shot of adrenaline by infusing banks with money created out of thin air. And the results? Banks now have greater supplies of loanable funds. And the price of money drops. And as the interest rate comes down, that same signal goes out to the business community saying, hey, now might be a good time to invest in those long-term productions that before we put off because the price of money was too high. And you know what happens next. Manufacturing expands, new equipment gets purchased, long-term research and development takes place, construction projects begin all over the country in not only commercial real estate, but residential real estate. And of course, there's increased employment, and lots of new activity, new investment activity. Almost everything that you would expect to see in a period of genuine economic growth. But not everything is as it seems. Unlike the savings-induced boom, this phony boom, this inflation-induced boom is on an unsustainable path. The only reason these new projects can continue at all is due to an ever-increasing amount of money creation. But if the money spigot ever gets turned down, even just the slightest bit, there will no longer be adequate funds to finish all of these new projects. And of the few who do make it to completion, they won't have a customer base to buy their products because consumers have been spending all of their money on present goods, not saving for any future ones. Without the necessary resources to sustain all of the new business ventures and to maintain the existing lines of production and support the spending spree that consumers are on, employees get laid off, resources are wasted, and businesses go bankrupt. The market has become discombobulated and the inevitable recession will come. Mises used an analogy of a master home builder to kind of stress his point. Here's a short version of it from one economist. Mises compared an economy under the influence of artificial credit expansion to a master builder commissioned to construct a house that, unbeknownst to him, he lacks sufficient bricks to complete. The sooner he discovers his error, the better. The longer he persists in this unsustainable project, the more resources and labor time he will irretrievably squander. Money that is created out of thin air, rather than real savings, merely encourages entrepreneurs to continue along their unsustainable production trajectories. It's as if, instead of alerting the master builder to his error, we merely intoxicated him in order to delay his discovery of the truth. But such measures make the eventual bust no less inevitable, merely more painful.